It is time for our feature presentation by Mr. Chris Reed. Quick intro on Chris. He is a principal and full stack developer at the DFW-based product consultancy Super Basic. He's built websites, mobile apps, and campaigns through user-focused, results-oriented development and consultation for clients like Vice, Goldman Sachs, the MCA Chicago, the UN, I mean like the global UN? I want to hear more about that, as well as a variety of SMBs, DTCs, and startups, which I guess are SUs. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Chris Reed.
Thank you. Okay. I think I've got the Zoom set up correctly. There we go. All right. So I'm here to talk about my project Legigram.com and talk a bit more about Civic Tech and how my attitude towards Civic Tech has changed and where it might be going. And yeah, so here we go. So I want to make some promises to you about what this talk is about. So we're going to see if you can hold me to these. Let's check in on it at the end of it. But two big promises. One is that you'll gain a new perspective on how your work in tech can affect other people. And the other is that we might actually increase your appetite and ability to engage with civics and to a certain extent history. Really, the civics part of it is the big thing here. And so yeah, but first I want to say thanks to Luke and Stacy and the GDG team for putting this together. To my business partner James Pierce at Super Basic for helping me work on this project and tag team on it and all of our other projects. Also, I want to thank my Fairmount and Fort Worth neighbors. Fairmount's the neighborhood I live in, and it'll become apparent why I'm thanking them here in a little bit, as well as the family and friends who've suffered through conversations about arcane city council issues and a range of other things related to this project. So yeah, so here's what you're in for. I'm going to talk about why I went about developing Legigram. I'm going to talk about what it is, what does it have to do with Civic Tech, and we'll have a little demo. And I'll talk about how it works, what's next, and then we'll do a little Q&A in case you don't have any questions. I will warn you, this is a programming light talk, but it is a development talk. So for those of you looking for problems about recursion or what have you, you know, I think you might still enjoy it. So why build Legigram? In a quick minute, it's about better access to city council agendas. Now, who here has ever looked at a city council agenda? All right.
Yes, we have. We've been to city council review.
All right.
We sat
All
in the
right.
audience.
Yeah.
We're that level.
Yeah.
Yeah, third day living in the city.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that counts. That's all about.
Mayor, the whole, you know.
Got his restaurant recommendation.
Very good. Very good. I've done a few of them. And I suppose separate of that, so let's zoom out a little bit. Who here has conversed directly with the city council member or the mayor or somebody with? So we got the same. And then, okay, let's zoom out a little bit further. Who here has voted in a city council election? There's still, okay. All right. So we catch a few more there. Yeah, we catch a few more there. So I want to give us just a quick primer here for those of you who might not know. There's a lot here that I've learned recently. So what does the city council do anyway? It sets all sorts of laws related to zoning and what traffic and businesses and regulations around permitting. But the council is our elected representatives then helping manage the city. So they have oversight on the actual city staff and city government, right? So they're not actually doing much more than going to the meetings and signing off on things and then communicating with the rest of the community. I mean, it's actually quite a lot, and it's not particularly well paid. So they care about their city typically, and they are well informed, and they're our conduit to what's going on in city government typically. Now, the city council agenda is basically, you know, what's on deck for them for any given meeting. And the reason it matters is that it lets us know what they're going to set into policy. So, and you don't really know this until it hits you, but time is really of the essence with that agenda, because it could be that, you know, some huge buildings coming in down the street from your house, or that you're moving a street or what have you. And if a meeting is on Monday, they release the agenda info on Thursday. Doesn't give you very much time to get organized about it, to inform yourself, or create any sort of meaningful pressure towards whatever your interest might be. So, and you don't have to take my word for it, but the role of city council came out of the early 20th century in America, when we had a lot more of what's called machine politics. Most famously, Tammany Hall. Here's an illustration from Harper's. You can see the brains running out there with the money. And there were issues with corruption and inefficiency in government. And that led to a push towards reform that manifested not just in city councils and commissions coming in, but also the form of government known as weak mayor government, meaning that the mayor is sort of an empowered council person, but it's the city manager who actually manages the running of the city government. And so in addition to that, there's staff that doesn't change over with any new mayor coming into office. So where I live, Fort Worth really came into being around that era and reform. And so like a lot of cities throughout the country, once you move west of the East Coast, it has that city, that weak mayor form of government with the county. So there's a lot of variation though in the way councils set law. And so here's just a quick run of a few different cities. And I'll just point out, like in Cleveland, they have it so that the council has to read legislation 3 times before a vote on it. And this project here, the documentary project, is also working on city council agendas and making them more accessible, in part because in Cleveland, they suspended that requirement post-COVID. So, and there's concern about that as far as oversight and all that sort of thing. And you'll see here, there's a sort of a range of how bills come to pass. So to recap, faster review of agendas means we'll have a better understanding of the legislative process. We'll be able to have more civic engagement and oversight, and hopefully better press and better government. That's all great, right? But like, why do I care about it? Why might you care about it? And especially given that we have elected representatives, we have video archives online, that the agendas themselves are online already, right? So that should be good enough. So this is probably not a familiar image to any of you all beyond the fact that it appears to be a pool. This is the Forest Park pool in Fort Worth. It's about 100 years old, at least from its original incarnation. I think it's one of Fort Worth's best amenities, and maybe the most serenely set public pool I've been to. It's set in Forest Park. It's huge, and it has these 50-meter lap lanes that like Olympic athletes come from counties away to train in. And in fact, people come from all over the city to use the pool because it is effectively the one pool in Fort Worth. There's another one that's a bit smaller, and not, it doesn't, I don't think the other one has a diving board. This one still has a diving board. I first went to it when it was, peak summer, super hot out. My wife was pregnant at the time, and it was just like so nice to be able to be somewhere to cool off and actually see people from like all over the city in one place, just sort of enjoying themselves, like not yelling at each other from their cars or what have you. And yeah, so I thought that was just wonderful. And then I saw something about a bond coming up and plans for the pool. And I sort of put it aside, but then I was checking the neighborhood Facebook group and I saw this. It really bummed me out because I had just like, sort of discovered this pool for myself, and I thought, oh, I'm going to be going swimming here all the time. It's going to be great. You see that nothing in the news has been reported about this, right? That the pool is going to be demolished and replaced with a splash pad. So a lot of people in the neighborhood got, piled on, got upset about it. And so much so that our council person responded. And I'll let you read that for a minute if you want. But what she doesn't say here is that the diving area is going away and that the lap lanes are being severely reduced. And she does mention that the pool is going to be closed for a season, which if this coming summer is as hot as the last one, it's going to be a real thing. And more to the point, though, there's this call to email her office, and that this claim that there's a lot of misinformation going around. So how did that come to pass, right? Why is there misinformation going around? Why is she asking for information to be channeled through her, but it's not publicly posted? Well, I decided to see what I could find out about it. And so I did the thing that, the people who have something going on with their local city government do, which is you go to your city website. Yep. And then you cross your fingers, because you try to search there, you're not going to find anything about what they're doing at council or what's in process. But then eventually, if you live in, one of the largest cities in the US generally, odds are you're going to end up on Legistar. And that's what this looks like for Fort Worth. And so you'll see there's a search bar here, right? You can try searching there, but that won't bring up anything related to the pool. Or it'll actually bring up one or two things, but it won't bring up what you're looking for. And you can click on the city council or the work session. That won't take you to where you want to go either. That won't take you to that specific meeting. What you actually need to click on is meeting details or agenda. If you click agenda, it'll just download a PDF when you're still looking at this view. So you click meeting details, and then you get this sort of view. And then here you have some file number. Who knows what that means? And you saw from the description of my company, we love acronyms. But and then there's this action button. Who knows what that does? So you click on the file, that gets you here. Okay. And so I've jumped here. This is actually about the pool. We have this summary of this is farther down the line. It's picked up architect is what they're saying. And then they have these two attachments, right? So those two attachments are actually where the meat is. So it's like 4 or 5 clicks trying to figure out, which thing to click on, but it's at a minimum 4 or 5 clicks, and you're into one item on the agenda, right? So, and this is jumping back. So this is where we're actually hearing what's going on with the pool, right? And it's complicated. I mean, building a pool, keeping it up to ADA compliance, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I don't mean to throw too much shit on my council person, because there's real complexity there. And
cost
and
personnel cost, because full-size pool like that, they probably have to have 5 people on staff at any given time.
Oh, yeah, and then occasionally they have police officers, their staff, I
Yeah.
mean, it's. Currently, the number of lifeguards that have to have is just, it's a ton. But one thing you don't really see is any benchmarking of the operations of, how effective or efficient it is. And I can go deep on this, but I'm gonna spare us for now. I'm glad to talk more about it. But point is, with Legistar, you can also sign up to get alerts about some given topic. I signed up for that about the pool, and I might have gotten an email at some point about it, but it didn't really do what I needed it to do. So long story short, who has time for this? Who has time for attending meetings or parsing agendas? This is a reporter in Houston who covers the Harris County Commissioners Court, which also uses Legistar. It's like the county administrator. They have 335 items on the agenda today. So she's smart. She brings a lot of snacks. But this is a reasonably good illustration of what this looks like. People in government get it, they're deep in it, they're shaping policy. We have think tanks that, not so much at the municipal level, but more broadly are shaping public policy. And then we have interest groups and journalists and civic society, but then there's the long tail of the rest of us, right? And like there's those of us who, when we get riled up enough, we'll actually go to the council meeting, or we'll read the agenda, or we'll post on Facebook about this, that, or the other.
Well,
But-
little kids have.
But the large tail of it is people who do not have the time, right? Do not have the time. And yet, access to policymaking is critical for a functional democracy. It's like a sort of core concept that goes back to town halls in New England. But so we might wonder, why doesn't Granicus, which is the parent of Legistar, fix this? Well, unfortunately, your persona doesn't matter to GovTech in this situation. Granicus, Legistar, we're secondary because they're selling to city staff. There's a city clerk who's in charge of setting up the agenda, logging the decisions. And this is software, Legistar is software that's been built for that role. So this is what I call the GovTech gap. We have this capture of a core bit of the government workflow, and we have moats around that, and a platform effect from Legistar here being basically, the big player in town. There are a few other options out there. Los Angeles has its own city agenda software that is the only one I've seen that looks older than Legistar in terms of the UI. But what comes along with that sort of monopolization of one layer is you end up getting like a de facto standard, which is a sort of a nice thing, actually. And then what comes along with that is the opportunity for what people have called like a civic tech patch. So to sort of summarize, Legigram's civic tech why is this the project I'm into? Personal and local motivation. There's this GovTech gap and civic tech patch opportunity with a long tail of interested users, in the sense that there are a lot of people who care about what's going on in the city around them. And then I saw it as an opportunity to make software better for people, which is basically what I've decided on as a reasonable enough statement of mission for what I'm trying to do with my work. That said, we have to beware, because not only in government, like GovTech, the commercial space selling to government entities, but also within the civic tech community, there's a tendency, as with developers generally, right, to think of tech as the solution, right? And that in itself is complicated. I'm sure we've all seen the tire swing as requested by the client and as sold and as built, and it's particularly problematic when we're talking about government, right? Because the stakeholder incentives are particularly screwy, we could say. And that also implies a particularly pernicious form of extension neglect in the sense that elected officials don't have to deal with the long-term consequences of signing up with some new vendor, right? And then there can be seriously disparate impact that is hard to articulate, depending on what services are put in or not put in and who has access to those. So and I dropped this slide in here from James Mickens, who gave a security talk about security. Security, talking about security, about skepticism and security. And he has this sort of summary of assumptions related to technological manifest destiny. I'll just call out the idea that technology is value neutral, and this will automatically help everyone. The idea that technology should be deployed as quickly as possible, and the idea that history is uninteresting and unhelpful. If you haven't watched that talk, I highly recommend it. It's excellent. Which brings me to a little bit of history. So this is a developer talk where we have a Tocqueville quote up on the board. So de Tocqueville famously toured the US in its infancy and wrote back to Europe about how great the democratic experiment was. And I mean, also how certain things were challenging. Let's just leave it at that. But one of the things he pointed to in particular was the art of joining involuntary associations, and how that helps guard against democratic perils such as excessive individualism, the tyranny of the majority, and the stifling effects of administrative centralization. So and another bit of history I'm going to drop in here while we're looking at this. Free press at the time actually had, among other things, it referred to, a little bit later actually, but it referred to it implied the right of newspapers to freely send their publications to other newspapers. So effectively, the US Postal Service was carrying like pounds and pounds of newspapers free of charge to other newspapers to help facilitate the distribution of good information through subsidy from the federal government and merchants writing letters to each other who are actually paying for the postage. So so that leads us to think about, what does the 21st century joining look like? And how does civic tech fit in, and how does software fit in, right? And you can think further about, change.org or your Facebook neighborhood group, or campaign software that political parties use. So what is Legigram? Legigram helps you understand and improve your city's policy making. That's the quick version of it. The slightly longer version is that it provides the fastest review of government agendas, matters, and related attachments for over 30 million local constituents across 25 localities and counting. Here's what it looks like. So nothing too fancy there, but you click on your city and you get a view like this. So you can see agenda updates since the last couple of weeks, and typically that will involve agendas that are upcoming. And you can see the types of agenda items and then their status as well. And you can filter by those and filter by the title. And then you just have a single page scroll of all the different items. And there's a second section that just shows items that have been updated recently, because sometimes an individual item will be updated. And then when you get down to a specific item you're interested in, you can click the view button and it'll actually open that PDF on view right there, and then you can close it, keep going. So basically you're able to just grok the whole thing on one view. Makes it about as easy as checking your Twitter feed or whatever. Mastodon feed, sorry. So, and then I just wanted to give a nice big image of what that type hierarchy looks like. So it's a facade to the public Legistar API. And just to recap, Legistar provides council agenda management software as a service to most of the large cities in the US, and there are a few exceptions. So quick stats, it's about a year old. That's about how many users we have right now. I talked to how many government bodies and constituents we're covering. So here's how you use it. 1, 2, 3. And then I call out bookmarking it. And then the critical step is actually step 5, right? Like I've built all this out so that you can do step 5. And I'm not trying to tell you how to do step 5. Legigram.com isn't really doing anything about that, but it's about facilitating that step 5. So I sent it around to some journalists. I've been sort of steadily doing that as I add new cities, and this guy works in Arizona. He asked me to add it for a few other cities. He covers like 3 different city halls. And my favorite feedback I got so far was from Harrison, who works for the Fort Worth Star Telegram. And it was actually a conversation with him that partly prompted the project. And I'm a big fan of The Wire. I'm actually rewatching it right now. But so I appreciated the GIF. So some principles that are what Legigram is in a sense, or that go into it. It's an open-minded project that's skeptical of doing too much, of being a solution in itself. It's user-focused, it's community-focused. But the big thing is that it's about being fast. It's fast to use, it's fast for me to develop, and it's fast for me to iterate on. And what that turns into, in the case of the pool, is being able to get a bunch of people out to make posters in advance of a public meeting with hundreds of people. And there's the city council person for my district and the parks director in charge of the pool. And this is actually the city manager, who's more or less like the head honcho of Fort Worth government. And unbeknownst to me at the time, in fact, I offered a poster to his wife to make a sign. She demurred, but my friend Rosalind here made this sign, which I think is one of the more concise statements of the issue at hand. And that made it onto the nightly news. And then this final slide is the updated design for the pool, which our main achievement was getting the full length of the lap pool into the new design. So that's the big achievement of the meeting was actually my neighbor Dorothy DeBose, who's a longtime activist in Fort Worth, involved with a lot of different organizations. She got up and made this comment that actually like named the problem, which like none of us had been able to do. And it's that, you know, the city was operating off of this master plan for aquatics that was just like outdated for where the city was. The plan had been cast in the moment of austerity following from the financial crisis.
Oh, fun.
And so at the time, actually, Fort Worth had 7 or 8 pools, and then the city went around closing them because they cost money to run, and they figured that was a way to save money. But the key point here is that the software is not the solution, right? The solution that came about there was everything that followed afterwards. So I'll keep this brief. I just want to give you some sense of what it looks like, and hopefully that will open. Here, I'll just do it this way. And so here is, let's do Fort Worth. And we're on this enormous resolution, so there we go. And so you can see
85-inch TV.
it is enormous.
That's better.
It's not a 100-inch TV. Seems bigger than 85.
And so in this case, you'll see this meeting has passed, right? So we actually have the statuses now for these items that, you know, we can see all the ones that were passed. Or we could uncheck that and see the agenda ready ones. There's somewhere there video, you can put that to see the video now. But so I'll go through here and just, you know, scan, see what's the city's buying or not buying, see what zoning things are coming up. I mean, it's pretty quick to just go through and have a look, and then all of a sudden you're learning more about computer aided dispatch and this, that, and the other contracts and zoning issues and all sorts of things like that. So that's how it works. It's not so much. But one thing I will call out is that I have links back to the system of record. So, and just to give you a sense of what this feels like, let's go to the calendar. So here's the view you get. Okay, so I want to go down to meeting details. And I want to go here. I want to look at, let's say I want to look at this ratification, right? And I want to click that, and that downloads. So that's sort of the delta between the two. So let's see if I can get back to what we were looking at before. That was the yeah, I think I just lost my presentation, so that serves me right. There we go. Back, and here we go. Quick review for everyone, in case you missed anything. All right, so how? The general approach might be summarized as lean delivery, which is a little silly for just more or less one person shop. James has helped me out a bit with it, but it's think, make, check, less work in progress, iterate faster. If you haven't read Accelerate by Fosgrim at all, read it. It's 3 years old, but it's probably the best summary of lessons learned about effective software development life cycles and all that. So the tech stack looks like this. Next.js, so I have one code base for server side, client side, Tailwind. So the directional dependency makes sense, and I can just edit one file. I will call out their refactoring UI PDF is just amazing. If you do any sort of UI work, even if you're not using Tailwind, I just think it's an excellent summary of best practices at this point. I'm using Cloudflare for the content delivery network, but I recently learned that they don't support the cache control headers for stale while revalidate, which is something I'm going to use to improve the Google score and all of that. I can get into more detail about that if you want, but basically.
I also don't have a good rescale system.
So
but they host your images.
Yeah.
So
no, I mean, I don't mean to ding them too much, but I'll probably be switching to Fastly, and then Heroku is what I've been using, but probably not gonna keep using that. Redis is being used as the memory store, love Redis, and then Legistar is the data layer. And then on operations side, I have one planning spreadsheet I use in Google Drive to plan out which city I'm going to do next and keep track of the number of people in that city and who the reporters are. And then I have sort of a feature spreadsheet that I'm using to evaluate impact of this challenge.
I wasn't able to find the GitHub. Is it a non-public GitHub?
So great question. It's not open source. And that is intentional. I've thought about making it open source and when I might want to do that, but as it stands right now, this is part of like the skepticism part of it for me, is that I want to get it into good shape and have it go and be healthy and good. And I'm not quite ready to commit to open source maintenance. This is part of what it boils down to.
I was just thinking because one thing that I've done in other things is like, especially when it comes to adding new cities, to come up with a format of ingestion Cause at least with Legistar and like whatever that other one is that we did, like there was like there's some like basic constructs that are like very shared.
Right.
So if you could,
So credible.
like a map, yeah, like make a map file and have people fill it out for you,
Totally.
yeah.
I'll speak to some of the other projects that are out there that wrap Legistar that are open source.
Yeah,
And
cause then you're only maintaining a map file too for every,
no, and I mean, so for adding new cities, it's actually fairly trivial. Sorry, something in my throat. And I'll show you what that bit of the code looks like actually. And anything else I want to speak to here? I tried doing a donation thing with Ko-fi. I'm not happy with that. I'm gonna switch over to Patreon. I feel like they have better learning that I need in order to figure out how to do proper calls to action around donation and network effects. So we'll see how that goes. But this is what it looks like when I add a new city. This is what the object is. That's more or less all that it requires to add a new city with the way the code base is built. There are some places though where the way they manage videos, for instance, sorry. The way they publish videos varies, so I've had to tweak that a little bit. And then there are some cities where this happens.
oh, fun.
So I've run into 3 cities where their API is not available. At least that's what I was told when I wrote in to say, hey, there's an error. We get back to this problem. Contact your jurisdiction. So we're back into that step 5 without the aid of having the agenda browsing capabilities, let's say. Though in this case, it's not really an agenda item as much as it is a political pressure concern. So for Baltimore, Philadelphia, and San Francisco, those are the 3 I've identified so far. I've reached out to local developers who seem to be interested in civic tech. I've reached out to people who work in city government that I know are the Legistar users. I've reached out to the Office of Innovation sort of offices at Philadelphia, at least, if not also Baltimore. And people made an effort in Philadelphia. I've had some back and forth with them, but what's particularly interesting with Philadelphia is that their API used to be open and then they closed it. They have an authentication layer that's just, you can't get past. New York is the only city that requires you to use an authentication token, but you literally put in your email address and then they send you one. So great, right? Very New York. So step 5 again, right? Learning, emailing, campaigning, working with local news and government. So what's next? Where does Legigram go? I want to increase usage. I want to find support, and financially that might be something, but really it's about like partnerships and finding other interested parties who can help boost the presence, to help increase usage, to maybe create more conversation around council agendas and this sort of civic tech. And then I would like to add more features, and that might be tied to, actually making products that people might pay for. So notifications are one angle, or building something that makes it easy for vendors to like search across multiple cities would probably make sense too. There's also obviously like this huge corpus of texts and documents that, you could use AI for. But really what you want to know is what's happening with the pool, right? So the pool is still in like a design phase right now. It's going to be under construction. The aquatics plan in general for the city doesn't seem to be evolving, unfortunately, despite some promises from the mayor that it would, but yet to be seen. And we have a city council election coming up this year. So elections are every 2 years. And I'm actually considering running just to, not because I particularly want to be a city council member, but more just to be able to have a platform on which to pressure the city to do more about aquatics and focus more services on city residents in general. So and generally, though, I would like to avoid this situation, which is one of the pools in Fort Worth that got demolished. And you can see to the right of it, there are a bunch of bricks from people who made contributions to the pool to get it opened. And it's a really ugly thing to see something like that, where, you know, people have gone out of their way to support some community effort and then have it get demolished like that. So the larger question might be, where is municipal tech headed, and how do GovTech and Civic Tech fit with that? Lots of cities right now are in this race for growth. Things are sort of different now that money's more expensive, but generally speaking, you know, they want to grow their tax base. That means bringing more jobs, better schools, and within the Metroplex, there's a lot of competition with that. There's so many municipalities. And then additionally, we have this issue with like all of these different platforms that come into cities, whether it's short-term rentals or ride shares that then they have to respond to. And typically the way they respond to it is by regulating, and regulating might mean signing on to another GovTech SaaS, and then there are more enforcement needs. And anyway, along with all of that, we have cheaper sensors, we have more surveillance, and surveillance is, the way I say it is that one person's transparency is another person's surveillance. So you know, we can see more about what council's doing, we can see more about you know, where shots are fired in the city and all that sort of thing. But there's a lot of challenges that come along with that, not least of which is that we have this sort of dueling we have this competition between complexity and innovation, right? Where we have more and more software, more and more wicked challenges, and then at the same time, this need to push forward with cutting through that and creating better services. And just on that note in particular, I think it's worth noting that, you know, sometimes a municipality will figure out what they think is the best policy, they'll write the bill, and then other cities will follow and use that as model legislation. So I think it's one place in particular to think about how what it means to be innovative in municipal government, because, you know, people pay attention to, you know, Bitcoin miners in the city hall, but that's Fort Worth made the news last year for that. So and I want to just take this opportunity to call it, I didn't say it earlier, but we have I help run another user group called Full Stack DFW. We have a talk next week with Eric from Microsoft. He's going to talk about ChatGPT. And we have monthly lunch and learns on the third Wednesday at lunch. They're remote. We have a weekly newsletter with a few links on DFW and tech and when the two meet. And we have a Discord where you can chat and whatnot. So if you haven't seen it, do check it out. And so to summarize, I just wanted to check in. Hopefully we shared an improved interface for browsing agendas and matters. I think we did that. Yeah, we did that. Hopefully I articulated a vision for civic tech beyond transparency and surveillance. Maybe. And did I tell a story of civic tech enabling better civic engagement? Does it feel like that happened? Okay, cool. So that's it. We can do a Q&A if y'all have any questions. I'm glad to speak to any part of it, whether it's the pool or the tech or what have you, but thanks.
Great. Yeah, no, I think it's good. We can yeah, take a few questions. My question is, the name. Where did it come from? I have a guess, but I'd like to hear your take. And then, have you ever thought about making a better one?
So, you mean a better name or?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, it is sort of a low hanging fruit kind of name, right? In the sense that this is about legislation and it's about making it. Okay, sure, there's another company that is famous for that last suffix there, but it's actually literally making things readable, like that root there is about readability. So I feel like that holds. It makes enough sense, but I'm open to suggestions too. So I'm not totally beholden to it. But
Yeah, to be honest, I wasn't thinking legislation. I was thinking like legible.
yeah, no, it's a little because they can both be about readability, right? That I see that.
Yeah, literally LEGIBLE.
Right. Right. No, that would work too. But no, yeah.
Civicagendas.com. I
Karen's.com. Actually, council and Karen's.com. I should just own.
Yeah, you should.
I can make it go to like people of Walmart. Just supporting evidence.
Well, there is a thing with so there are regulars at city councils, right, who complain about lots of things, but are also typically some of the better. Sometimes they're particularly well informed, sometimes they're not. But there is this dynamic with people come to city council when they're angry about something. They don't come otherwise. And it's actually, I think a lot of people don't realize how much of a dead giveaway it is that you're not going to come back next week when you show up so angry. And it makes it sort of easier for people to discount what you're saying if you're really attacking, X, Y, Z official in your city government. That said, there's a lot of footage and instances of it, and even within the Fort Worth Council, there's videos on YouTube of a neighbor of mine really going head to head with my council person in a way that's not particularly productive for anyone, I don't think, but there's a lot of that.
I think it would be kind of interesting to also look at the integration side to see like, hey, what change.org petitions have the city hashtag currently on there, or be able to click to how to submit an issue internally, or for that, like, so that on that city page it's also a list of some of the basic city government resources.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and it's something I've been thinking about, like what complementary sources or resources to put into the site, whether it's for all cities or for just.
I think the change is probably the easiest one, right? Like hashtag Baltimore, like
You're the ones that are coming up. Here's what people are talking about. No, that's a particularly good one.
Yeah, it's interesting to follow on with that with like little share buttons on the bottom of each of these call outs for the agenda items. Plus, not to mention, if you were to invent a way where like a journalist could tag a Twitter article they wrote back to one of your items, you could tell like how many times it's being been tagged.
No, and so with the Twitter side of it, there are a lot of city hall reporters actually will live tweet council meetings. So, and they'll go, you'll sort of see when they're hitting each agenda item if you're looking through the site. I've been resisting that urge to do more integration work because I feel like that's the developer in me that really wants to just like connect all the wires that I can. And I'm trying to resist that like
until you get the product where you want it to be.
Yeah. And I don't want to make more assumptions about what people do at that step 5. So like for the pool, I went from that Facebook post to making a change.org petition And then that went into me writing posts and then to that rally and then, from there and there. But I was using like the working version of Legigram throughout that to inform myself better as I was communicating with other people in the community who had sort of come together around the topic. And then they were sharing things that they had learned and all that. So I think there are some other use cases too that might come up around not necessarily archiving, but there really aren't that many places where you can see like
Historical.
well, just across all the different cities at the same time, right? Or on a given topic, right? See
Which
what,
one's a band pinball, or which one's a burning
Be
attack.
able to do trend analysis,
Mhm.
like and predictive algorithms, right? So like you can say, hey, it's March, for some reason, like 50% of city councils think this is the time to vote on these kinds of topics.
so on that note, these are some of the other council agenda efforts that I've come across. And in particular, I would point you to Intro
Yeah.
NYC. He's doing great work and he's doing a lot around visualization and really sort of summarizing the data that's in the API.
New York City and Chicago are like the best, I feel like, at the open civic data.
Yeah, I think that holds. In Chicago, right? There's a group that did this Councilmatic project. That was a while ago. It's a Python code base that's open source. But it's heavy. It's so much. And I wanted something that was just quick and easy and I could look at and it would just be a little bit faster, Likewise, this Documentaries project is incredible. They have a bunch of funding and they're actually doing a thing where they're like crowdsourcing coverage of council meetings. So you'll get paid $15 an hour. They have like training on their website and then you'll go and take notes for everyone else to follow along with. And they have chapters in Cleveland and in a few, like 4 or 5 other cities now. But I think the organization that runs it is based out of Chicago City Bureau. And then the other one I call it is just, it's a very base, it's sort of maybe the most analogous to Legigram. It's just a bill bot in Cleveland that posts whenever there's a new bill that comes up into the system. And I think that one's open source too. So yeah, I guess I'm the only one who's clutching my source code so desperately. While we're on the topic though, I'll call out some other civic tech efforts that I think are really awesome. GovTrack US, really great resource for understanding what's going on with Congress. Ballotopedia is wonderful for elections and jurisdictions across the country. Open States does sort of a similar thing for state lawmaking. I can't remember if they have Texas though, they might not. And then the Free Law Project has sort of a similar, they're making a similar effort to make court dockets more accessible. And there's a whole thing there with the PACER system. And I think they finally have it slated so that PACER will not be charging a fee. But basically, it used to be that you have to pay like per page or something like that. So they have people crowdsourcing all of the dockets. Yeah. And if there are any other questions, I'll leave us with one little. I don't know if you want to. Questions, thoughts?
Oh, I just want to say, like the next door is an app.
Yeah.
About what's happening in the neighborhood. I feel like this could be part of next door. Like neighbors will have tell me about it, and you will get a notification and then.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up because I think there's a chunk of people that use Nextdoor, and then there's a chunk of people that use like Facebook neighborhood groups. I'm in the Facebook neighborhood groups camp for whatever reason. But it's the chatter there that happens is, what my council person was talking about, where it's, misinformation or people getting angry about this, that, or the other. And I think it does sort of point to like, part of the problem, which is getting the relevant information in front of the people who are concerned about a given topic. because whether it's how much it costs to rebuild the pool and what people care about, as the city understands it, or it's what's going on with the zoning request for the commercial property at the end of your block. Everyone in that next door thread about it, right, will have their take on it, but where is the actual like primary source, like real facts of what's going on with government? Because it typically ends up we're in this taking hearsay from people of what's going on, and that complicates the discussion dramatically, I think. So
Well, then just point to like, kind of talk about sharing to Facebook or sharing to Twitter, but like, yeah, sharing it next door. Like, hey, I want to, oh, hey, this looks interesting. I'm going to go post this. And that way it's a link back to that definitive source, right? So,
Yeah, being able to share out enables you to start taking metrics on what people care about and servicing those more, because $8 million on contracts to insure your boiler is probably not interesting to anybody in this city.
right, except the people who are selling the boilers, right?
Mhm.
And
Well, the insurance, not the boiler.
yeah. So,
but I think that there is some thought there for me currently, which is that I don't want to create a bunch of link rot by like giving links that then in 3 years don't work. And that's coming from working on other civic tech projects before that, exist for a minute, and then this dependency or that dependency falls out from under it, and then it's, then you're in that demolished pool situation where, so, and there are a few other civic tech efforts I want to point to. There's one actually that's by the federal government that I think is really awesome for like data sources. That's govinfo.gov. There's an interesting thing going on in New York with there's this Twitter bot where you can like post a license plate and they'll tell you all their moving violations or parking violations, which bicyclists in New York, the like civic tech bicyclists, are using on municipal vehicles that are blocking bike lanes. And they actually have a bill that they're pushing right now that would compensate people for tagging those. So it's sort of like a crowd enforcement surveillance thing. And then another one we're sort of considering in this set is do not pay, which got really a lot of press a couple of years ago for helping people dismiss parking tickets. And now the guy is moving into like he's trying to get people to wear AirPods and let their AI lawyer tell them how to argue their case. So just some sense of where things are going.
What about that guy that gets you to unsubscribe from nasty pernicious subscription services like Comcast Cable or whatever?
Right. No,
Or you out of a contract.
it's similar to that, but I think it gets weird when it's with government to me, like to bring it, and it's not to say that it's that I think it's bad or something. I just think it's sort of the frontier and things are going to get weird. So there's one little poem I wanted to just put up here at the end, or it's a little bit of prose rather. This is by Richard Childs, who was sort of the lead reformer who brought in the weak mayor form of government, as well as pushed the short ballot movement, which was about simplifying voting so that more people would be informed about who they were voting for rather than just voting straight ticket. And so he has his own skepticism here about efforts at reform, which is a bit of solace for me given the challenges with the pool. So anyway, thank you all again, and I hope that was inspiring in one form or another about what you can do with a little bit of dev and tech to make the way we find common ground and work together to make better government and make better cities to live in. So
Say that you call this civic. That to me it's like illegal. Because that's not anything. It's like I think I actually saw his presentation in person as Denver is law. Like they have a program as legal tech. He's a kid, and he was like, even before he went to college, he did that app. So it all feels like legal. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it all touches on lawmaking or policy making, right? And again, like back to some of the earlier points, I think the critical thing for us to keep in mind as tech workers is that the tech is not the solution, right? It's enabling something, and what are we enabling? And there's one last sort of tangent I'll put out there, which is
I don't know what's the rally to.
right, right, right.
Well, I go to rally, I will click on my phone and see the thing.
No, I mean it's particularly problematic when you have to drive through traffic or whatever to get to wherever it is.
Did you know that you can pay people on Fiverr to call and annoy?
There's gonna be bots you can just like ask them.
Can you put a button on your phone that's to hire someone to go to the
Rally for
rally?
you.
You'd be like, I'm here on.
Yeah, I mean, there's paid protesters, right?
Well, I will say that one of the we often think in America about like voting as being the thing we do to be involved with democracy, right? And be involved with our government. And that does something. But then when you get to the point where you actually want to, change what your council is doing, right? If you're one person going in, that's much less meaningful than 1,000 people going in, especially with a city council person, because that's, they probably had 2,000 people vote for them, right? Like, if that. So but the point is that you need to be able to demonstrate, that there's a mandate here. And it's difficult, it's still sort of difficult to prove that digitally oftentimes, right? Or even with the phone, right? Like, and I'll give one example of this. So with short-term rentals, right? Fort Worth had a forum up a few months ago as they were trying to figure out how they were going to approach their zoning for short-term rentals. And they had a ton of responses to it, but a good chunk of those were from people who don't live in Fort Worth, but are other short-term rental interested parties from other parts of the country who are very well organized to help each other advocate for more liberal short-term rental policies in all of their respective municipalities. So it's just to say that, like, when it's people on the ground in your city square or whatever, it's very clear that those are your constituents who are showing up because they care about something. And that's meaningful to politicians because they want to stay in office typically, unless they've really lost their taste for it, which
This is why you should always donate money to U.S. House races that are outside of your own state.
anyway, so
I don't know, I just think it's funny that how many people are just like, the presidential, my vote matters a lot in the presidential election. It's like, your vote really matters, in, like, who you elect to city council and like who is your county. And
I think at the county level, I'd say Denton County is pretty well going to be one way for sure.
well, in Texas, so much is actually determined at the primary level, right? Which is part of, I mean, we can get very deep on that, but what I was going to say, at some point I actually did the math on like the ratio of representation we have for each level of government, and like the council is really like where it's at in terms of, you're basically like one of 2,000 people more or less, and at least where I live, of 1 in 2,000 voters, which voter turnout is anticipated for this city council election, is anticipated, and the mayor is anticipated to be something like 10 to 20%. So
here's an idea for you. I want to know how Chicago Alderman gets so rich.
that's something, it's definitely not from their salary, right?
no, because it like tops out at like 87 or 89,000 a year
Mhm.
for being an alderman, but it is a full-time job. They are like, and they have staff, like,
Well,
it's.
the staff have real salaries, and I mean, they have real benefits, and
Right,
but in Fort Worth, the city council members, they were actually, there was a bill for them to, or sorry, there was a vote last year for raising their pay rate, because does anyone here know what they're paid currently? I mean, I live in Fort Worth, the rest of y'all don't. So city council members in Fort Worth are paid, I think, 25,000 a year,
it's pretty on,
and
25 to 30.
well, the mayor makes like 33 or something
Yeah.
like that. Never mind that her husband is a lobbyist. That's a separate conversation. But you know, it does sort of raise the question, like, how does this sustain? Like, why are you interested? Like, yes, you have the interests of your community that you care about, but this is clearly not your only job, right? Especially for the amount of groups you have to deal with.
Almost all of them are to some degree like either remote workers or independent like business owners.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I'd say that probably, this was theorized a long time ago, a lot of these people came from insurance or legal backgrounds that are rooted in some community serving individuals.
Right, right. And I mean, there's a similar dynamic with the state legislature in Texas, right, too, where it's they make 7,000 and they somehow, right? Somehow.
I mean, they get like $65,000 a year.
You know, I mean, I think I have not learned very much about campaign finance, but I have started looking at the forms that are required for running for city council. One of the things that's interesting is that you don't have to do very much paperwork if you spend less than, I think, $900 or something like that. And part of that's because there are so many elected offices in a given Texas jurisdiction, because we elect judges, right? So they're not out there spending, you know, $10,000 or $50,000. They might spend a few $100. Yeah.
And then you can also get other people to do it on your behalf. It's not part of your official campaign.
Well, and that's where there are like anti-coordinating laws and that sort of thing. But it's a complicated landscape. I don't claim to know very much about it. But
Somebody comes after you. You spent $300 more than you were supposed to. And you communicated with your independent mini pack. What can I call it? Micro pack. It was your mother-in-law. That's because she believes in your dreams. But she used photos from your shared account, something.
well, there is a literature that speaks to like the amount of information we have about our elected officials and about government and all this transparency actually having making people more conservative, because we're exposed to just scandal after scandal and like sort of the warts and all reality
Yep.
that, you know, 30 years ago you could sort of, it was hazier.
The thing about Clay Jenkins always comes up, for instance.
Well, what's that? I don't know.
Oh, so what he did at Baylor, I guess, I don't know, like dressed up in blackface and stole a woman's panties out of a sorority or something like that at Baylor.
Right.
Like in 1983, Scott Trump with a bunny one. It's still, they bring that up every few years.
Right. Well, and so we have like all of, you know, everybody's college years escapades that are now, you know, readily accessible on the internet somewhere, right? And the incentives for the press to create scoops and scandals around that, right? Which that part is not new. It's just the amount of information that we have, and also, you know, changing demographics and changing concerns, right? Like America today looks different than it did 50 years ago, and it will look yet different still in the next, you know, as we move forward. So, yeah. All right. I think I'm ready to call it. Good. Thanks to everyone watching, though.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for watching. We're gonna end the live stream for now, and then we'll wrap up here in the room.
And I will absolutely make you add our